Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I did actually manage to get Keystone Master. And I have to be honest here, it has been an extremely fun journey and a couple of days here, the first week of Season 4 and also the first reset day. But also quite a frustrating week I've had, because these pugging runs have been extremely tough. Now after getting done with all my M0s, I pushed myself up to 490 and that, got started on all my +2s, which, in actually practical effect is actually +11s and 12s. And other than, having to work out some kinks in routing and stuff like that, to make sure that you hit the right percentage and you don't over pull, but then also just don't end up at the last boss with 99%. It's been fine actually. Well, except for as soon as I got into Academy for some reason. I did actually notice doing the M0s that Vex, the big arcane elemental boss here, was probably gonna be the most threatening to Pox. Usually that would be the tree boss. I remember the tree boss before the nerfs in season one was particularly scary, but if you just hold off cooldowns to the second ad wave, then that boss is honestly not that big of a problem. But I've definitely been struggling on Vex a lot this week, which has been extremely frustrating because, as a tank player, there's not really much here you can or should do. A lot of the things that people are dying to are the insane raid damage, but also just the swirlies on the ground. Which, is difficult for a tank player to actually deal with. In the same way also that the tank buster here is kind of hard, especially if you are, pushing yourself a little bit and trying to take as many orbs as you can. Pushing it into free orbs or having free stacks on you as something, that is probably around my limit of what I could survive and what I couldn't. But talking about orbs, something I completely forgot about that would have made this these attempts, because we are actually gonna wipe to Vex and we are actually gonna wipe to him even more. It's basically just it's all about the overlaps here. And if the one thing that I actually learned from season 1 that I completely forgot about is that if you actually let him just eat one orb, you can do it from right at the beginning. He will gain energy from it, and that will actually make it so you won't overlap these different abilities, and they all will come after each other instead. And from a DPS perspective, this whole fight is just about being prepared for the different damage that's gonna come for you, through the orbs, but also just being aware of when the swirly's gonna come. But also when the swirlies come, there is also that pushback that also does initial damage to you. So there's a lot of damage going on, and if you're not aware of all the different things, that's what basically is gonna kill you. But we just kept on pushing, and third time actually turns out to be the charm, and we actually got the boss down and managed to continue on. And I think, because I've seen a lot of other WoW YouTubers and content creators also talk about that, also on Twitter and stuff like that, that this season seems a little bit more frustrating or a little bit more rough, pocking it. And I think that's simply just because that there are a lot of veterans, for example, me who played since season 1. I remember, most of these mechanics I remember pushing these dungeons. Even though it's a year ago and I might be a little bit rusty and have to brighten up, there are people here who just basically just haven't played it at all, or maybe their only encounter with Dragonflight Dungeon has been through normal mode, which there's a big difference between normal and mythic. Not only that there are more mechanics, but also just that in normal you don't have to care about any of the mechanics, so you are kind of just blind to them. And now, since the Mythic Plus levels has been squished, you're also just having people who haven't tried this dungeon going straight into basically, the plus 11 or 12, where before they would just push into, a +2 and a +4, giving them much more time to familiarize themselves with the dungeons before just jumping right into the place where, if you don't do the mechanics, they are going to kill you. And the worst part of this is, right now, that is giving a really frustrating, experience, because as I mentioned before, someone who has played these dungeons before, it's been kind of tough, pucking it, simply just because of how frustrating it's been that you can do I won't say like everything correctly because like clearly, you know, I don't want to come off as like arrogant or being like, you know, oblivious to my own mistakes. It's not like I'm playing perfect either, but you definitely have, like, when you're playing tank at least, having different situations where there's not really much you can do, and then all the responsibilities are on people who, you know, are not familiar with the dungeons. But even though that I am, like, you can see this as a negative now, I actually think like squishing down the Mythic Plus levels and pushing more casual players into harder content is so important for the game, because I think for the longest time, WoW has not asked the casual player base of anything, like, you know, performance-wise. So kind of pushing them into harder content, I think is gonna like actually make the whole player base of WoW and like in general better, which I think can open up for more interesting gameplay. Because I don't know if this is a hot take or anything, but like normal and heroic dungeons are, like, in my opinion, really horrible, because like they are so brain dead and they don't ask you to do anything. They don't ask you to learn any mechanics because you're never in actual any danger. Meaning that the game just kind of just becomes like hitting training dummies. And if you think that's extremely fun content, like, you know, I can't really argue against that. I just want my game to, like, you know, ask a little bit more of me than I think the WoW actually does in like its really casual level of play. And it's not like I'm saying remove Algeth'ar or anything. I do think it has a place in the game, but I definitely think, you know, pumping up the difficulty in heroic dungeons and mythic zeros is definitely the way to go to make this game healthier and better for the future. And also another thing that I think like adds a lot of, like, you know, hardship on pugging dungeons for this like first week is also just that we started on Tyrannical. Tyrannical typically just ask a lot more from DPSs and healers, and, you know, the big healing checks are usually at the bosses, so them getting even harder from the get-go is gonna lead to a lot of, like, you know, failed keys. Which, funny enough, actually made me more and more nervous for Fortified, because I was like, if this is like, I can see how difficult this is for everyone else, because typically Tyrannical is not that difficult for tanks, but I also just want to point out, I did actually notice that they really amped out on the tank busters this season. I don't think that's just because I'm playing Paladin that I've noticed that. These bosses, like, some of them like really hurt. But now, like, after a day or two playing Fortified, I actually noticed that the dungeon seems a lot easier on Fortified than it does on Tyrannical. Not to say that there isn't hard parts, because there definitely is. Halls of Infusion is something that's, like, gonna come to my mind. The dragons right before right after the second boss and right before the third boss. Those hit, like, extremely difficult with their breath and their frontals. And so, you know, sacrifice Bloodlust on the pull right before the third boss. That's probably going to be my go-to, because I didn't do that in the run you're going to see, like, next in the video, or, like, later in the video. And, yeah, I definitely, like, fall over a lot of times. So, yeah, in order to save my mentality, I decided to go a little bit easier here in the first week. Let people, you know, catch up on the mechanics, and then just making sure that I time everything. I started slow on a +2 with basically every key. And I honestly didn't really find that much issue in most of the dungeons. There are just some dungeons, specifically Academy, that I have just for some reason struggled a lot on. Now, besides Academy, it was Knockhuld and Azure Vault, and then actually Ruby Lightfall here that I struggled the most on last week. Now, since it still is Tyrannical, most of the trash here actually wasn't that big of a problem. And honestly, it still wasn't a problem now here in Fortified. It's mainly just the dragons that, you know, are an issue, and specifically the fire dragon that you can definitely skip if you just make sure that everyone runs far away from the two different spots that he can land, and make sure to stay away from them, like, you know, when he cycles through them. That's a lot more difficult in POCs than it is just here to tell you, but yeah. Now, it was the bosses definitely here in Tyrannical that we were struggling on. And funny enough, it was actually always the second boss that was like the hard stop for us. And it kind of makes sense. First of all, the death right here, it doesn't really make sense to me. I'm like, it wasn't even close to that mortar, but like, I guess I was maybe like lagging or something like that, and I like didn't actually walk out of the fodder. Yeah, you can also see here it's like slow to release and everything, so huge lag spike, which is really not nice, and definitely like kind of led us to the first wipe here. But this is also one of those like pog killing bosses, because what she does is she punishes really bad placement, which is something that's really notorious for pogs, right? That's something they, you know, they always do, just always like in the wrong position somehow. But we decided to like, you know, reset. Now the second group vibe here, I also think is extremely funny, because you can see everyone thinks we are safe, but then it just blows up and just kills everyone. And before I can even hit the top, our dear Paladin decides to leave. So back in the queue we go. So I do actually end up finding a pre-made of 3 DPSers, and then I just pick up a random healer. So we're just gonna try the 5 instead. Now Ruby Light Pool actually starts off with one of my favorite pulls of this season. What I like to do is like take these 3 packs and pull them all together. I usually have an Avenging Shield up by this point, or I just run up to use my Interrupt, but luckily, you know, I had a Deathlight with me and he just gripped this caster like right into the pack. Now, something I've mentioned in a previous video is that I love to chain pull. So before the pack is even dead, or, you know, I think it's like half health, I'm already moved on like to the next 2 caster packs. Now, since it is Tyrannical, I'm not as cautious about like, you know, how fast I'm pulling these chain pulls together. Like if it is like, you know, Fortified, I might have been waited just a little bit more, or waited until a little more like packs, a little bit more mobs were, you know, had died off. It goes honestly pretty well until this unlucky smash right here that brings our Death Knight all the way down to like 10% health. And then I actually also drop down. Now I saw it in the comments on the last video, and I do have to admit, I am a little bit rusty on Paladin. It's absolutely true. All the times that, you know, I was dropping down in health and like, you know, almost getting one-shotted, it's basically when I did the like big no-nos when you're playing a Paladin. And the biggest of the no-nos is basically just not utilizing consecration enough. Consecration gives you an insane amount of like damage reduction, that it basically just becomes like your bread and butter for like your survival on the Paladin. And then not only that, you know, with the whole not dropping it enough, there's also the, you know, the whole strategizing about it, you know, because it is a stationary position, you can't move it. You have to be standing in it in order to get the buff. If you move out of it, then all your defensive basically goes down. So there's like the whole mindset of like, where do you actually drop it? Where is it safe? Where it's good? And that's also something I've been like working on, especially with like frontals and stuff like that. I've like, you know, throughout this like last week here, there was like many times where I put down a concentration kind of well knowingly that there was a frontal coming up that like forced me to move out of it. So that's definitely something that I have like been working on with my gameplay. The other thing is actually spending holy power well enough, and specifically actually Word of Glory. See, the thing about Paladin is basically that, like, in theory, you have to choose between using Shield of Righteousness or Word of Glory. You know, ask a question between getting more armor or being healed. And, you know, I'm saying in theory, because in practice, not only does Shield of Righteous give you so much more benefit, also parry and stuff like that. It just is 9 out of 10 times just more beneficial to press that button. But the key here is 9 out of 10 times, because there are actually specific moments where pressing Word of Glory is much more beneficial for you. Now, of course, you do actually get free Word of Glories, you know, and you basically have them up almost all the time. And, you know, there are those situations where you don't have it up, and like when you're almost close to to dying, and like there comes the question of like, you know, not completely ignoring Word of Glory. It's a really, like, in that niche, in that situation, it's much more beneficial than Shield of Righteous like probably would do. The same way also that like you probably want to use Word of Glory a little bit more if you're fighting bosses that does a lot of magical damage. What I'm basically trying to say is that I've noticed in my own gameplay that I've been in situations where a Word of Glory might have made the situation a lot better and nicer for me than a Shield of Righteous would be. And I've, you know, kind of got into the rhythm or the habit of just sometimes just kind of ignoring Word of Glory, right, when I don't have it up, because I'm just focused on getting like free Shield of the Righteous out. Now, actually, what's interesting in this key here is that we've been struggling on ads. That's why we're coming this other way around. And our, like, I don't know who, but like someone pressed drums during this pull right before the second boss that, you know, I'm personally really scared for. I was so confused. I had to ask, and you know, they tell me there's just like a misclick, and I honestly in real life I couldn't stop laughing. It was just so iconic to me. So not only not having blood loss for this boss fight, I'm also going into without my major like defensive cooldowns because I had to use them on a pole that we also just died on. So that like double sucked. What I do actually have is Ardent Defender and Eye of Tyr, which I'm trying to be very conservative about because I can see that like my Kings is like far away from getting on like off cooldown. So I can't just like be popping them off like both of them at like the same duration of the same fights. Meaning that like I am going to drop like really low. And then you can see here I'm popping off my Eye of Tyr and I have like 20 seconds before my Ardent Defender is gonna come up. So that means that like I'm prepared for the next Searing Blows. But that honestly doesn't really matter because unfortunately we get separated, or our healer more specifically gets separated from us. And he's gonna spawn the ad all the way out there. He's gonna like, you know, in the middle of the lava. There's not really much we can do. This also boulder is gonna go off, killing almost like half the group, and then yeah, we're just gonna wipe here. As I mentioned before, this boss is really terrifying because it's all about placement and where you are like as a group. You should almost like basically just always stack, and then as soon as like you're not with the ads and you're with the boulder, every DPS and healer just stands behind the boss, so it always goes like behind you. But like that's difficult to coordinate in a puck group. We go again, but you know the healer actually gets hit by the boulder and dies. And this is one of the things that kind of sucks about this whole like pucking experience. And I think what's like been really frustrating is that, well, we are now playing at a level because we are all under geared that we need everyone's like throughput. Like now it's the healer, which is even more critical. But like even if it's like just the DPS, right? You honestly need the extra DPS to survive for like most of these fights. So one mistake. One person not knowing the mechanics can kind of screw the whole thing up. But here is my big mistake. It's honestly screaming in my face. I had Divine Shield up and I just did not use it once. I was recording this key like last week, and then, you know, I went back and looked at it after this key was done, because I was like, you know, there's no way that this boss is hitting like this hard. I'm like, I'm running out of defensive cooldowns. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm obviously doing something wrong, right? And yeah, I was. Yeah, no, Divine Shield is such an important aspect of the tank. It's not that I never pressed it at all. It's just, it's so far from like my mindset because, again, this is the thing. Last time I played like Protection Paladin was back in Shadowlands. Back then, you know, Divine Shield would make it so that like everyone lost aggro, right? Because I wasn't running with the talent. I don't think really that it was like that used, the talent back then. So now like I'm not used to having that as like an option until like, unless it's like the very last moment I'm like, you know, about to die, but it's honestly right now one of the keystones and one of the things that make the Paladin such an incredible tank and like the potential of the Paladin. Because of like, what is it, 8 or 7 seconds, you're just completely immune to all damage while everything is just targeting you. And it's on a 3-minute cooldown with reduced cooldown, which makes it such a keystone. So watching the footage back, I realized that, you know, I had to use Divine Shield a lot more, and it is something that worked on a lot for my gameplay. Unfortunately, it just didn't survive, so yeah, I just couldn't deal with it. I was honestly really frustrated at this point, and I just had to leave and take a break. I took a break, I came back an hour later, and I, you know, just decided to push my 4 off the key instead. And I know there's like a certain perception of like leaving in Mythic Plus, of like here in the WoW community. And I think like there are a lot of people, I don't know if that's the part with the key, I don't think it's a lot of people, but I think there are some people who have a little bit more like, you know, leaning on either like kind of extremes of like, you know, well, all levers should just be completely like banned from the game. But I honestly, you know, just think it's a little bit more like nuanced than that. I think that there are exceptions where you just kind of like, you know, are allowed to leave. And like my kind of rule is basically just that like I don't personally want to screw over anyone, and I want to stay in keys. But if it's not really like leading anywhere, it's not going to be timed specifically, and I just, you know, kind of just becomes like a sour mood in there. Like either no one is like talking at all, you can just kind of like feel it boiling up, like, you know, from inside people. And it's just other times people are just starting like calling out, you know, each other for like doing stuff, and it just becomes this like, do you really want to deal with this? And like it's just like when you're looking at a dungeon that's like supposedly just should take like 20 minutes, and you're looking at it, it's gonna be like 45 minutes. Honestly, it's your time at the end of the day. If you want to spend it in, you know, complete pugging nightmare, or if you just want to accept that you're not gonna time this key, no hard feelings toward anyone here, but it's just not gonna be timeable. I'd rather just, you know, go out and try again and just, honestly, in my opinion, spend my time better. And that's the thing, because right here, you know, we just go in instant, like pulling her, no problem whatsoever. It's just such a better gameplay experience that I don't understand why you just won't like do it. I don't think you should like overly punish yourself. That's like probably more the people I'm talking to, like people who think this like really like highly morally of themselves and think that they have to like suffer through this, because I think it just honestly leads to a more toxic experience for yourself. That I just don't see why you would honestly do that to yourself. Here's a little tanking nugget for you. This is like a little trick from like season 1, where I heard like there's a lot of like people like struggling on the last boss of Ruby Life Pool. But honestly, what you want to do is you want to focus the dragon, because that's the one that's gonna like spear all this stuff that's gonna like deny you ground. And if you pull the troll guy here all the way back to the statues, and it's important that your DPSers and healers are standing like behind here, because he's gonna spawn near them. If you're standing behind the statues, the dragon is always gonna spawn here, and you can land, and the melee can hit him, and like it's so much easier. Because as soon as you know kill one boss, that stops the mechanics from that boss. So it's important to kind of just like focus one down, and the dragon has like the worst mechanics. But yeah, what personally felt like forever, we finally got a Ruby Life Pool above a +2 timed, which is great. Now the guys from that Ruby Life Pool was actually pretty cool, and we free chested it, so I decided to ask them if they want to join me for my 7 Azure Vault, which they were really happy to do because they really needed some IO. Funny enough, they actually decided to send me a route they wanted me to do, and you know, I was kind of just up for it, sure. I had a pretty standard route in mind, but you know, they wanted to go in and do this like where you pull the dragon ad and spawn these ads right here. A little bit nervous for it, but you know, because I remember in season 1 this was also a thing, but they were like really difficult and they like hit really hard, but it seems they got nerfed. Because I honestly just had no problem living through this, and I also did it later here on Fortified, and it was also the same thing. It just really were no trouble at all. Now the first boss is where we got our trouble, and honestly this is also the moment that I was like really the most nervous about, because it is basically just all on the tank here. You are the one who has to line up the shot with the trees here, and also you're the one who has to like really quickly pick up ads because they do hurt. And the thing about this boss is honestly I like the mechanic like in theory, but like these puddles on the ground, and this might just be a skill issue, it might just be me being terrible at the game, but I feel like it's so gimmicky. I really wanted to like hit the absolute maximum of the range, and you can see here, absolutely like miscalculate how far that's gonna be, but sometimes I just step into the puddle and I take like the most insane amount of damage, and that honestly wiped me. But that's not to say that that's just all my mistake, because this boss also just hits like an absolute truck. Our lovely Shadow Priest just gets absolutely one-shotted. And then later in the pool, because I was like really like unprepared for this amount of damage, I just panicked and died to the swirlies, which is really really unlucky. Now we actually just did some more pulling and wiping to it, and quickly they like decided that hey, why don't we just like try the 6 instead? And that just went so much better. So what's really cool about that route that they sent me is basically that you clear half the ring here, or like a little bit more than half, and then you jump down where the second boss is. Now just, you know, make sure that you have something to take like care of the fall damage, either slow fall or just like, you know, an immunity or something like that, because you will die if you just jump straight down. And I got a little bit confused about where they wanted to go, but you actually want to go like turn like straight back to like the under ring here, and then start pulling this patrol with this like standing pack right here. And then you just go straight back and you just press W and you just pull everything from now on. Honestly, I really like this route. I know it's like from season 1, but I never honestly ran it because I always really liked my own little pug-friendly route. But the reason why I was a little bit hesitant is just because in season 1 you had a pull where, because you could do the bigger skip, you actually had the pull where you pulled like double the dragon ads. Maybe actually, I think it's actually like 3 of them. And they are, back then, as I said before, they were like really difficult packs to pull. Now, only having 1 here in the beginning, while it still definitely is a make it or break it, it is also kind of a good indicator that, you know, if your group is actually going to make it from like the get-go, right? From the very first pull. Yeah, I honestly think it's gonna be like a new route for me. I like, at least like, you know, maybe like working out some kinks in it. Because like it's pretty cool that how much you actually skip, even though like right here you just pulled everything, but all these like packs don't really have that many mechanics. The only thing I can like, you know, probably like hear complaints about is like the frog ads. But honestly, if you just started like, you know, stunning them, like especially like with my stun that's like 6 or 8 seconds, it's like insanely long. That's a lot of damage you can do, and because they honestly don't really have that big of a health pool. Now we actually do have like plenty of time when we come back down here to the last boss, but unfortunately we actually are gonna lose 2 DPSs right here, which is gonna cause us a wipe. On the second pull, our healer decides to stand in front of the like big laser beam coming out of the dragon, which is definitely not good for his health, so that also gonna like lead to trouble. There is 60 seconds until we have a battle rest, so, you know, I was like thinking here like it's probably doable. And, you know, our Shadow Priest goes down, and I'm also a little bit worried about using Blessing of Sacrifice because I'm also extremely low, and here I've just decided, you know, we're just gonna reset the boss. Because it's important to look at the timer, and like we have probably just enough for 1 more pull and still time it. And timing we did. After a short vault, I, you know, just went on and just completed a bunch of keys before reset. First one is a Keystone level 4 Brackenhide that we just only 1-chested. I actually did go back to Academy to time a +4, which was really good for my IO going into the next reset. It really sucks just to have it down on a 2. Now the only key I didn't go back and time on more than just a 2 was actually Knockhuld. Simply just because I just wasn't motivated. I really just, yeah, wasn't really not having fun in my first initial run of the Knockhuld. So I'm just gonna wait until, you know, more people get a little bit more more comfortable with the mechanics, and also just a little bit more geared for myself, but also just from others, so the run just becomes easier, and I'm just gonna take it on next week. And that actually leads us right to the reset. There's some decent options here. I decided to go with the pants because it made it like replaceable with but it's basically my lowest eye level, and then I just went over and I got 2 set. As you can see, we are back in Academy, and this is what happens to my PC and my frame rate when I just pull everything. As the pull goes on, it usually gets better, but honestly, those first couple of seconds are extremely deadly for me, because like my PC will just freeze up, and if I get hit by one of those swirlies, all those ads are gonna start attacking my body, meaning that basically everyone's just gonna like instant die. With no further PC issues, we just go in and completely like smash it, and of course get a bunch of score from it. After that like warm up, I decided to push my own key, which is a 6 Alderman. Now, since it is actually fortified, I like to just use Bloodlust here in the beginning of the first pull, and then just go straight to dwarves, because when it is Tyrannical, I usually just always go straight to the totem boss and Bloodlust there, because he kind of just is the like bigger DPS and healing checkpoints. Basically the like DPS checkpoint, like can you kill the totem before he gets his Bloodlust cast off? Because that usually is the one that's gonna like wipe the group, because it just buffs every ad, and all the ads are like, you know, jumping to everyone and just basically like at high enough keys just one-shotting people. And I just want to say, like, I always enjoy dungeons that like offer you the option to, I guess every dungeon offers you the option, but here it's actually like viable to like change up your route depending on like week to week basic. It's a small thing, but I always like enjoyed it. Now, a place where I really noticed the Paladin shining is actually this boss fight. So it's not really Paladin specifically, it's just that I have my own personal stun that I can use on this boss. In like practice, what that actually means is that I will always have at least 1 extra pull, as you can see here, without having to, you know, wait for others to spawn. And as the fight goes on, I'm gonna have like 3 or 5 like of these like stun pulls that I can just always use. And of course, it's always nice that, you know, I don't actually have to move the boss always. Like I can also just, you know, throw the stun whenever I want to. And yeah, the rest of the run goes surprisingly well. We only have just a few handful devs going off randomly. I was honestly surprised because I remember this like ultimate being really like difficult on Fortified, also on Tyrannical to be honest. Just in general, it was like a kind of painful dungeon to go through in season 2. But yeah, no, it was surprisingly pleasant. And then we went right back to Ruby Life Pool, the good old, the classic. Let's see if we can get past the second boss. And yeah, I mean, it's basically just all about placement, as I mentioned before. Like, if you have a team that knows how to bait the boulders away from like the group and away from like where you're going, it does help to, if you're playing as a tank, to ping where you want to go. That, you know, I've tried that out. And it sometimes it works, sometimes people just ignore it, but it's just a little trick you can use to try to ping where you want them to go. But yeah, if everyone knows like how to play, like the placement and everything, this dungeon is like, I mean, this boss is honestly, well, I don't want to say extremely easy because you still have the tank buster that you really need to rotate your defensive abilities around. But other than that, it's a pretty smooth sail. One unique thing that I've noticed I'm doing, other than other things is doing, I'm actually pulling these free packs right here and then going over to these smaller ads. Now, first of all, you don't actually need these smaller ads for percentage, but they are just nice to get out of the way because they, you know, you're probably most likely going to pull on either side if you pull them like on with the boss. And the boss already have plenty of mechanics, so you know you don't have to add any more swirlies to that fight. And you know, you could potentially pull it, this pack, these 3 guys into the next pack. The reason why I'm splitting it up is just because of the channelers, of how important the interrupt is on that one, that I just really want to make sure that I don't go into a pack with like 2 channelers. But I mean, if you're in a coordinated group, you can probably most likely do it and survive and it'll be fine, more efficient than this. But if you are just pugging, this is something I highly recommend just because it makes everything easier. And when I go into this other pack, this is where I will go all the way on the left when I feel like it's relatively safe, like interrupting wise. Like they don't need me for a kick because it's gonna take me a second or two to get over there and get in range for the small ads on the left side. Yeah, and you know the drill. I always pull the boss all the way back here. It makes, look at the dragon landing right on top of our group, making it so much easier to DPS it down. Again, you're gonna see here the dragon cells is gonna like drop right on top of us. It just again makes everything so much easier, especially if you have a bunch of like melee players on your team. But oh, like even if you have range, just like everyone being stacked, meaning the dragon can only come like, you know, where everyone is just always beneficial. A few more deaths and a little bit slower in the time, but we do actually manage to get through, which is awesome. The next key was +4 Nefarious. And the reason why I stopped pushing my own key is simply just that I want to like select these, like target these specific dungeons that I still haven't timed yet. And with this Nefarious, I'm gonna actually hit 1814 score, which puts us really close to KSM, and I'm still missing 2 dungeons to time. The first one being a Brackenhide, where I get into a +4. Brackenhide is gonna put us at 1872, and then of course the next dungeon is gonna be Knockhuld. I already gave Knockhuld a bunch of shit in the previous video. I won't bore you too much here. I'm still not a huge fan of it, to be honest. And it definitely seems like on the scaling wise, this dungeon seems to be one of the hardest this season. Now saying that, I did something completely insane, and I kind of just did it because I had to try it. I did a double pull here with Bloodlust and everything just going, because I remember season 1, that was a pretty like standard thing to do. But yeah, no, I couldn't. I could not survive that. That might have been me remembering like wrong. Maybe that's something you only did in like lower keys. Yeah, that was definitely not working out. Totally my bad. I even like called him out saying, yeah, never mind guys, I'm sorry about that. But hey, you know, now I know. And instead of like, this is like the cool thing, I think like season 3, like the last season, really did a lot of good for WoW community because it doesn't really feel like there's the same spite when like something goes wrong anymore. Because like, as you can see, like I did a poll where everyone wiped and we still have plenty of time. And after this, I kind of just go a little bit slower and a little bit safer, right? It's just sometimes you just have to test it out. You just have to risk it. This is just a little reminder that if you're playing a tank, one of the packs that you should be really hyper aware of are these Kodos. This interrupter it does right there is gonna hurt you a bunch, and just in general also does insane amount of damage. Don't underestimate these guys. Oh, and this is another thing I've noticed a lot of people are not really knowing about, but like on the third boss, this little leap that the Ranger actually does, this area effect that's like, you know, under her or like where she's gonna land, that doesn't hurt you one bit. So you can just position yourself here. It's also like with the same with like DPSers, if you're melee DPS and whatever, you can also just position yourself right there where she's gonna land. You don't have to actually like go out of that circle or whatsoever. Even on Fortified, this last boss is still no joke. And actually what's like surprising is that like most of the damage, it's not really in phase 1. It's actually right here in the intermission. If you want to increase your success rate of this dungeon, you want to actually save Bloodlust for right this moment right here. And you want to also make sure that you have a lot of cooldowns up, because these ads needs to be absolutely nuked down. One of those bolt brings people to like 40% health. And you know, they're just going to keep on casting. They don't really have a cooldown on. They're just going to keep spamming them. Usually I can get a Divine Toll on pull and then also have it up for right this moment. But if I couldn't, I would definitely hold on like to my cooldowns for this moment right here, because this is where people will die. And then you go into the second phase where the Tank Buster kind of becomes the healer's responsibility now, since, you know, he has to like dispel you so you don't take as much damage. The actual initial first thing that the thing that the healer actually has to dispel you is the one you want to take like mitigation for, because that's still gonna hurt you. But usually as a Paladin here, I can just use Word of Glory and then just be fine. And then like another thing as if I'm like something I noticed as you're playing tank here is the circles that comes around people, the one that like leaves an area effect on people. People tends to forget. I think that they lands it, so people like cannot like stand like all crammed up like this. So just prepare whenever you see that circle to sorry for hitting the microphone, to move out of that. Like make sure that you, as a tank, you're ready to kite as soon as this mechanic is over. Because the last thing you want is a DPSer who's panicking and accidentally putting the spear and then the charge like over those or like near those area effects, and just kite them away and then just make it easier for your DPSer. We got the boss, but we're missing just a slimmer of the percentage. So, you know, we killed these two ads right here, which are honestly dangerous. And you definitely want to make sure that you have like interrupts off for all their kicks, because they are like throwing those bolts that hurt. But we got the dungeon and we actually got a ton of score from that, almost KSM. So I figured let's just go with a big one. A +8 Halls of Infusion, pushing my own key. So we start off with a pretty standard pull. I just go on the right side here and then pull the 2 packs standing at the doorway with them. And, you know, you could actually Bloodlust since it's fortified and then pull the entire room. But I feel like, you know, there's too many casts and it's a +8. So I kind of just want to play it safe. End up Bloodlusting the boss instead, which honestly I am fine with. Doesn't really make a difference to me or my experience of the dungeon. Now the first problem I ran into was actually this mob going back to the pack that it was like coming from. Now I'm like going with a route that's like pretty much a press W route, but it actually does mean that like I think I'm like hitting almost exactly 100%, not pulling a single app more. So right now I'm trying to do my head, trying to figure out what do I do, because I'm gonna like miss 1% from like not having that extra ball app with me. And I'm trying to like wrap my head around like where can I pick up extra mobs, because I do not gonna go in and pull an entire like pack of these. But if I just go straight to like the last boss and then like missing a 1%, you have to like do a lot of like backtracking, you know, to like get a mob. I mean, of course, the fastest way to go back would just be to like teleport back, I guess, and then jump into one of these packs and only kill one of them. But then you have to like run all the way back to get loot. I just figured, you know, there has to be like some ad that I can like pick up on the way. And my solution is that the only thing that I can like think of that makes sense is these 2 ads right here. But I do a crucial mistake, and that is I get rushed, because I see all of my teammates like, you know, running ahead of me. I'm thinking to myself, you know, I kind of like deep know that like, it's really fucking dumb what I'm doing right now, and yet I still do it. And we actually gonna end up wiping from this, because these shock troopers, I believe they're called, the one that actually like doing ads, you can see right here, they just absolutely just annihilated the entire group. I get called out by one of the DPSs, which, you know, it's totally fair because, like, what the fuck was that pull? Don't feel rushed, guys. Just honestly, you're the tank. Just follow with your gut instinct, and just this is what I should be done. I should just play it safe and just, you know, just take these like packs on their own. I told them even that, like, hey, didn't you see the ad in the beginning? It bugged. It like went back. I had to pick these up, and this is like stupid thing about risks sometimes because. Yeah, it's slow to stop the whole party to just kill 2 extra ads that you didn't really need it if everything was like working correctly. But the amount of like time we then spent having to walk all the way back and like also just dying, you know, 5 deaths on its own is like what 25 seconds added to the timer. Yeah, sometimes it's you don't have to rush, and it's really you make mistakes when you feel rushed. Or, which is evident, like, I make mistakes when I feel rushed. Everything else up to this moment honestly went extremely smooth, but here I'm actually gonna run into, like, a huge issue, right? And that is, I'm gonna run into one of the scariest ads on Fortified this season, which are the dragons. So what goes wrong here is I'm just basically just completely unaware of the amount of damage this dragon usually, like, actually does here on a +8 and completely throws me off the game. Luckily they changed the spawning place, and now we spawn right here, so I can go straight back right into the frontal, which is always really great just to start off a combat with. And it's funny looking back because I'm really panicking. You can see here I get pushed out of my consecration, and I just kind of forget to, like, you know, put it back up. Which is again one of those things where, you know, I'm still a bit rusty on the Paladin. It isn't like completely muscle memory for me, at least not just yet. Now I really love this next pull. It might be a little bit dumb or risky, but as a Paladin, you know, first of all I have my Divine Shield up and I actually used it this time. But also just having Divine Toll, like keeping all the silences out. I imagine like even Demon Hunters having a great time on this pull as well, but it's just fun, right? Because if you can keep a lockdown on the casters, you just have a bunch of nameplates and a bunch of numbers going off. Now the sad thing is, I'm just honestly gonna run out of defensive cooldowns, mostly because, you know, how many I had to use in the first dragon pull. So looking, you know, back here, I definitely should not have pulled this big when I didn't have the actual cooldowns to suffice for it. I think back then when I was like, you know, playing this key, I was just thinking that like Divine Toll should be good enough, Ardent Defender's gonna come up, and then hopefully Kings are gonna be up when I need it at the end, and it just wasn't. Again, here's 2 things. First of all, I'm feeling rushed. I'm going into this pull. I'm well aware the only thing I have up is IF tier. That's not gonna be enough. I still have like 30 seconds until Ardent Defender. This is gonna go horrible, and yet I still go in because I feel like I need to go, right? The second thing is, I should have bloodlusted this. This is a typical pull that you honestly bloodlust on Fortified because of just like how much damage there is, and then also just with like, you know, how much haste you would give. It would probably have buffed up some of my cooldowns a little bit, you know, getting them faster back. But, you know, eventually we get through. We are a little bit rushed on time. Not too bad. Not that we can't make it, but we can't be making a bunch of mistakes anymore. We pretty much need to get both bosses in like first hit, and then we can't fumble on the gauntlet. But yeah, luckily we get actually, I don't know if it's luckily because we have a healer that's just absolutely blasting away. It just keeps everyone safe, and we get the first boss pretty like smoothly. Now the way I pull the gauntlet is I just run straight up, take off the 3 first ads and then run up to this like caster ad and with this torrent. On Fortified, and especially this key, I'm splitting up the dragon. I'm not taking him with all of these ads. Again, you know, learning from my mistakes previously, I am terrified of him. And I just want to do it solo. And that's the thing, I noticed the timer. We have time to do it. It's honestly probably better for me to just take him, like taking the easier route now, rather than just risking it. Because if we wiped here, that will probably cost us the like timing the key. I could probably have pulled him just a little bit earlier. I do pull him like before the packs are dying, just so we can start DPSing him down while killing off the last ads. And it's also with splitting it up, it also just helps you getting your cooldowns back. So like I just take everything and run right into the next caster pack. And I actually like to use this little pillar and pull her back. I think it's a lot easier to like tank her right here for everyone else. instead of like having to move like up to her, because then you have like closer range for where the waves are coming from. Now I've seen a lot of people in the last couple of days get hit by this flash flood. The way I honestly just remember it is that it's always the third mechanic that's gonna come. First she's gonna do an AoE damage, then she's gonna do something you have to kick, and then the third one is the one where you have to run out. So usually all I have to remember is just when I see the kick, I just, you know, prepare my brain that like you have to get out of like from her. Like that's the next step. That's all I'm thinking about as soon as like the kick has gone through. When you're playing a tank on this last boss right here, you want to make sure that the area around you is clear when you're going for the tank buster. What that means is when he's actually spawning those like orbs, you want to like stay stacked or like as a group as much as you can, because they're gonna spawn near you. And then you just, right after they spawn, you move on the other side and you have this whole area that's just completely clear. So you don't have to worry about getting knocked back into an orb. I mean, of course, if you're playing a Paladin, you can also just Divine Shield and then completely ignore the mechanic. But yeah, after blood, sweat, tears, scary dragons, we finally hit KSM. I know I've been shitting on Pox this whole video, but I'm honestly having a lot of fun in Season 4, a lot more than I actually expected I would happen. I would have. And also this mount is actually pretty fucking cool. But yeah, that's been my long journey to KSM. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you liked the video, and stay tuned for more updates on my Paladin and just in general me. So yeah, everyone guys, take care.